Hey guys, CJ here with the Monday edition of Villains Month Character Bios, and as promised, this time it's Klarion the Witch Boy. Now, Clarion's a really interesting character. He's a lot like Loki in the fact that he's sort of a meddling, troublesome trickster who is allied with the good guys from time to time. But unlike Loki, I would say he's less personally ambitious and less evil overall. In his personal motivations, at least, Klarion seems to just enjoy trickery and mischief and a good prank at others' expense, so he's kind of good for that whole sort of trick part of the trick-or-treat aspect of Halloween. He's also got a really interesting origin story, and it's tied really closely to American history, which really interests me because I'm a big history guy, but his first appearance came in the form of The Demon No. 7 in 1973, a comic which followed the exploits of Jason Blood, the man who, kind of shared the body of Etrigan, who was the titular demon, and from the get-go he was portrayed as a mischievous, kind of bratty child. He tormented his quote-unquote Uncle Jason, even though there was no relation between them. Now, full disclaimer, this is Clarion's Pre-New52 origin. His own book from DC was actually just launched this month, and he hasn't appeared in the New 52 until last month, when he appeared in, I think, the Teen Titans. So this is his Pre-New 52 origin, as I said, and personally, I think it'll be very hard to top. I really like this origin. It's tied very closely to American history in a really interesting way, because it's Grant Morrison. But Klarion was born in Limbo Town. Interestingly enough, it's the place where the residents of the Roanoke colony ended up, and if you didn't know about the Roanoke colony, it was the first British attempt at colonizing the New World. It failed mysteriously as somehow all the residents vanished without a trace, leaving behind the word Croatoa marked on a tree. And that all really ties into the aspects of Clarion's origin story, at least in terms of where he came from. Yeah, the Roanoke colony, it was established by Sir Walter Raleigh, and he had to go back to get supplies, and when he came back a couple years later, they were all gone. Mysteriously vanished, no dead bodies, no traces, no nothing. So, if Grant Morrison is to be believed, if Clarion's origin story is to be believed, they went underground, and it's pretty much a corrupted version of that early puritanical colonial society, very religious, but in this case, it's kind of flipped on its head. Necromancy and black magic is super embraced. It's a way of life. In short, it's a society of witch people. And from birth, Klarion was rebellious and curious, always wondering about the outside world. Apparently, his father disappeared to the outside world, but he was restricted from going there by the Submissioners and the Book of Shadows. It's kind of like their holy text, their Bible. They claim there's no outside world. It's just all the underground. There's nothing out there. Like all the witch folk, Klarion has a familiar, his cat Teakle, whom he always travels with. His world starts to change when a Sheeta Scout, and they're a fairy-like people. They're kind of little, and it's interesting. They find out that this Sheeta Scout is there because Teakle catches it, and he has it in his mouth. And if any of you have cats, you know that cats love doing that shit. And seeing this as a threat, the Submissioners moved to close the Wicket Gate, essentially blocking them off from the rest of the underground and even possible ways to the surface. Klarion was furious. His explorations were restricted, and he did some snooping with Teakle only to discover that it's actually a plot by the Submissioners, and they feel threatened by the new Parliament. And they try to increase and assure their own power, and they transform into a Horrigal, an unholy and terrifying combination of the three witchmen and their familiars, and they move to attack the witchmen on their way to the Parliament to make it seem like the Sheeta had attacked, and you sort of give a reason for closing them off to the other societies, and just as a way to increase their own power. And it's actually worth noting that a Sheeta attack, what they call the quote-unquote harrowing, was foretold in their Book of Shadows. It was prophesized. So this isn't out of the realm of possibility. It's just them taking advantage of the situation, and Klarion actually ran to warn them, but it was too late, finding only dead bodies and the Horrigal, who actually then chased him, up and up and up and up through the underground layers until he ends up in the Manhattan subway system. Now that's about, enough of his origin. Really, after that, it starts to get into stories and how he interacts with the universe. And this is all from the beginning of the Seven Soldiers arc, written by Grant Morrison. It was fantastic. And it's the definitive Klarion origin text. And the conclusion of this arc seems from going toe-to-toe with Mr. Melmoth, who had been recruiting children into a gang with the promise of riches when they got older. But once they hit 16, he would send them off to mine on Mars. So Melmoth, not a good guy, very evil. And he was actually seeking to get down to Limbo Town. And of course, Klarion goes down, warns Limbo Town, and Melmoth is actually burned nearly to death. He survives, and he's like, I'm immortal, and then he retreats, and that's pretty much it for Klarion. He actually, from there, ends up using the power of the Croatoan, which I guess is their sort of holy entity. He uses the power of the Croatoan to take over the Sheeta and become the ruler of their entire race. And after that, he makes his way across the DC universe. It's pretty interesting. And then in the years since, he's run the gambit of good and evil. He often causes mayhem and mischief, but he's also sided with the heroes, as seen in the Batman/Superman Sorcerer King story arc. Now, Clarion's a master of witchcraft and black magic. He can shapeshift and turn into a Horrigal, as was taught by Brother Judah. His familiar, Tikal, also has magical abilities that aren't really well known, but it seems like he can supplement his own power with Tikal's. And his powers include telekinesis, mind control, energy blasts, and illusions, among others. So you can see why I might be comparing him to Loki a lot. A lot of his powers are mischief-based. And for some recommended reading for you guys, of course, there's The Demon from 1973. Number 7 is his first appearance, as I mentioned, but numbers 14 and 15 also include him. And as I mentioned, this origin story draws heavily from the Seven Soldiers Klarion arc in 2005, numbers 1 through 4, written by Grant Morrison. That's the definitive text. I mean, New 52 is going to have to redo his origin, but for now, that is the go-to guide. And Superman/Batman Sorcerer Kings is another great resource. It kind of shows him working from the good side, although Seven Soldiers Klarion also kind of made him a very sympathetic character. He didn't seem really evil, certainly kind of misguided. But Klarion 2014 number 1, that is the New 52. I've been hearing some pretty good things. Go check it out. I'm certainly going to check it out after this, because Klarion just became a much more interesting character for me. Anyways, that about wraps it up for me here. It was actually a pretty quick origin story. I could have gone into all the details about the Seven Soldiers arc, but it's much better to just read. I read through it in the last couple weeks preparing for this matchup. And it's a really good origin story. You got to give props to Grant Morrison. He's definitely a great writer, and he really, really made that character very interesting and sympathetic, whereas before he had just been kind of like an asshole. But anyways, that about wraps it up from here. I haven't decided what the next one is going to be yet. I've got some options here. I will let you know. You'll see it Thursday. It's not going to be too long for you guys to wait. So not sure yet as to. I do have a couple options. It's not like I don't know who it's going to be. I know, I have too many options. There's no good one. But anyways, that wraps it up for me here. Signing off, and I'll see you Thursday with another edition of Character Bios Villains Month. So see you guys then.